Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Three Nails podcast. I'm Vincent Mintz, founder of Three Nails Information Security. Today, joined by Jason Schultz, who is an awesome person and is a chief innovation and technology officer at a large national law firm. Today, Jason's going to bring us some wisdom and insight into what it's like being somebody in his position in a large enterprise. So, Jason, would you kick us off with a little bit of information about yourself, your background?
Yeah, great. I appreciate you having me here today, Vincent. Always love having these types of conversations because I feel as much as I might share in the form of wisdom, I'm also gaining it just through the exchange of ideas. And so very much appreciate you having me on your podcast here today. As you mentioned in the introduction, I'm currently a Chief Innovation Technology Officer for a national AmLaw 200 firm, where I spend most of my time trying to affect positive change by activating people and ideas. And working for an organization that has a long established history with a lot of different areas of law that we practice. There's just so much diversity in our business. So it's an exciting place to be, exciting place to work, exciting place to solve problems. Again, we have a national footprint. We represent all kinds of industries, as well as trade associations, nonprofits, educational institutions, governments, and high net worth individuals. And in addition to our primary business, which is the law firm, we also have a non-legal business consulting entity that does a lot of work around government relations, public affairs, and kind of helps organizations that are trying to navigate that intersection between business and government. So it's a very diverse portfolio of capabilities, and we serve a very diverse portfolio of clients. And so as exciting as that is, it also comes with a lot of complexity and a lot of challenges that we have to make sure that we're properly working through and risks that we're mitigating, not only for our organization, but for all of the clients that we represent. In my role, I have oversight over three primary areas of operations. So that'd be cybersecurity and data privacy, everything we're doing at the organization from an IT operations perspective. So our infrastructure, our network, enterprise applications, anything we're doing from a custom app dev perspective, and then how we support all those capabilities across the enterprise. And then the third area is, how we go about innovating, improving processes, implementing business valued outcomes and change for the organization. And so trying to balance all those requirements, keeps me going and keeps me energized. And it's a very exciting place to be. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I'm doing. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about how I got here. I know we chatted a little bit, Vincent, about kind of the origin story. So maybe that might be something you'd like to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. A bit there.
Yeah. So unlike some other peers of mine, kind of have a twisted path, but I think the common theme is I've always been a disruptor. I've always been someone that's interested in the pursuit of continuous improvement and change. Out of high school, I spent some time in the military. I then worked for a couple large corporations and then kind of steered into the technology space and worked for several software companies. And ultimately found my way into the legal community, which has been just an amazing experience and journey. And I think there's several things that have kind of led me to this place and led me to this opportunity, the role that I'm in. First, I'm a results-driven innovator, and so I have a huge passion for figuring out ways to disrupt the status quo, figuring out ways to apply new processes, new technologies, and ultimately deliver value to the organization. Love building bridges. In fact, that's what we're here doing today. I think, Vincent, when you and I first spoke, it was all about networking. And I'm a big believer that when you increase the number of collisions you have and you meet new people and you have new conversations, you actually increase your ROL, return on luck. And so I think that has also kind of helped guide me down my professional path and journey, just because I've been open to meeting new people and talking about new ideas and pursuing new opportunities. Big into collaboration, and so that's applicable across any industry, any vertical. So I love working with others. I love being able to figure out and solve problems collaboratively. And I'm really more of a technology enthusiast than a technologist. So don't necessarily play an instrument. I play the orchestra, but I've always enjoyed the power of technology, the transformative nature of the technology that we have access to, and kind of how it's improving our lives and businesses. And so that's kind of always kind of steered me as kind of some of the common underlying themes of my path and my journey. And the opportunity here at the organization I'm with really just kind of, it's in the strike zone of what I like to do. So
As a yeah, I mean, in some of our previous discussions, I think something that was highlighted to me, and we'll kind of jump into some of our questions here. Um, Something that was highlighted to me was you were speaking to efficiency and automation a bit, and I'm sure as a chief of anything in an organization of your size, those two things are absolutely detrimental to the success of your business. So um, you had mentioned reducing administrative burden on your employees and colleagues. How can one do that without sacrificing security?
Yeah, great question. So maybe I'd start by just sharing a little bit about kind of the landscape that we're operating in, right? So I think today the collective reality is that cyber attacks are increasingly complex, which is really the result of all the exciting things we're doing on the innovation front. If you think about the capabilities with advanced automation, AI, and some of the other advanced tools that are very prevalent. And so the landscape that we're having to navigate as it relates to cybercrime, it's very challenging. In the last 3 years, cybercrime has increased by more than 300% globally. And I think a lot of threat actors, are very creative and they're very sophisticated, and they're leveraging the same technology that we're using to innovate to launch very sophisticated attacks against organizations like the one that I work for, and a lot of other industries and verticals as well. And so I think the consequences today are more dire. I think cybersecurity experts that we talked with in our network, at conferences and peer groups, they're all predicting that it's only going to get worse. And I read a stat a couple of weeks ago that said the cost of cybercrime is expected to reach over $12 trillion by next year, which is just mind-boggling to get your mind around the scale and the reach that cybercrime has in today's world. And so, we really look at how do we continue to be an innovative organization, a tech-focused organization, while also navigating this very complex landscape that's presenting a lot of risk to organizations like ours. If you look at professional service organizations in general, whether that be law firms, accounting firms, there's a lot of very valuable information that we're entrusted with on behalf of the clients that we provide counsel to. And so we take that very seriously, and we always have to start with, if we're going to go do something, if we're going to implement a change, if we're going to improve a process, we need to start with how do we do so in a way that is secure, that mitigates the risks that we are presented, and that we can do so in a way that gives our clients confidence that we're handling their information in a very secure fashion. And so the landscape is changing. We have to change with it. I would say most of what we're doing as it relates to innovation, which is kind of where your question started, is around designing and developing and deploying solutions that reduce the administrative burden, reduce friction in process and workflow, and ultimately try to improve those operational efficiencies. And so that's true, but there's some areas of our operation when you think about security where we actually want to introduce friction, and we want to slow things down, and we want people to think before they act. And so it is quite a balancing act, but it's also very important that we do so. And so when I think about how we're leveraging automation, how we're improving process when it comes to cybersecurity, there's a variety of things that we're doing, I think, and a lot of organizations are benefiting from some of the advancements in tech to do so. If you think about our ability to identify abnormalities or anomalies in our data sets when we're doing backups, when you think about where intrusion technology, your ability to detect intrusions into your environment, like where that's at, that's all automated. Even how we aggregate and analyze data across the network with our SIM, that's all fully automated capabilities. Vulnerability scanning. If you look at everything from an endpoint detection and response perspective, that there's advanced automation that's baked into those solutions. Even a threat vector that a lot of organizations are dealing with that we certainly take very seriously, which is phishing. Your ability to actually notify the organization of something that's suspicious or potentially malicious. We have automated capabilities now around our ability to identify and quarantine those types of emails to make sure that they're out of the end user's inbox and that people aren't taking action on them, right? Patch management would be another one. We're always patching vulnerabilities. And then ultimately, like you and I talked about prior to this podcast, your ability to respond to an incident in the event you have one. So it's fine to identify all the threats. It's fine to put up all those security controls that we've talked about, but your ability to detect, respond, recover is really where I think the battle is won. So those are things that we're doing on an automated front. I think when I think about examples of friction, there's tons of friction. So think about it like two-factor authentication, right? We're requiring an additional step to verify. Okay, that creates friction. That creates administrative burden. There's access controls we have in place, right? That create friction. That can create administrative burden based on your function, your role. Password policies, which are always changing. Best practices are always changing. But that creates friction within the organization. And then you see a host of other things that are out there, not just within our organization, but just your experience as a professional or a person that's just navigating the digital world. So bot detection with CAPTCHAs, accounts being locked out. We have things and controls in place as it relates to time-based restrictions, session timeouts, the emails that are coming into the organization. If you think about spam filters and what's being picked up now, there's administrative burden there to have to review a digest and release an email back so you can take action. So the list is long. I would also probably add security awareness training, right? That takes time. People have to carve out time out of their day. They got to go through the training. But I think that's just another example where we really need to advance our human intelligence layer. And so areas where we're trying to automate, we're trying things happen behind the scenes. We're trying to reduce friction, reduce administrative burden. And there's other areas where we actually are proactively introducing it into the environment for some of the reasons that I shared.
Mm-hmm. I like that idea of frictionless security. I think one thing that it sort of reminds me of, though, is I almost feel like you could replace friction with frustration. And as an attacker, I feel like that's oftentimes what I've heard professionals of your nature in your type of position bringing up and finding to be true, which is it's not about how secure can we be. It's about making the attackers frustrated. And, it's like, okay, like to make me frustrated, it does take it does take a decent bit of effort to frustrate an attacker. But if you do it long enough and you do it well enough, it's going to pay off. So it's an interesting balance in my mind. It makes me curious about engineers and chiefs of large organizations having to create really secure networks, but not make them unbearable. I hear a lot of people complaining and just kind of crying about it. And I totally understand. I mean, I hate 2FA as well. Those types of things are really frustrating, but they're so necessary.
Definitely, to your point, it's a balancing act, right? So
yeah,
like we're not pursuing zero risk. No organization is or can. That wouldn't be acceptable, right? Like, so it comes back to what is a reasonable amount of risk that your organization is willing to accept. Again, based on the type of business that you're in, the type of industry that you're in, the type of clients you support, the type of information you have. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into that. So I think it's important, as you mentioned, to like seek balance, because just because you could doesn't mean you should in every case. Not to mention, if you implement every possible control and you locked every door and you had armed guards and all. I'm joking a little bit, but the idea is like at some point that might not even be economical. Like it might not make sense. So just things to think about is balance.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue. I feel like talking about some physical security and sort of the overlap between digital and physical. I think it's worth investing. Honestly, I don't know what percentage. I guess I should ask you. Should organizations invest in physical security over digital security, considering I can just walk in your front door, plug in a device and not even spend a moment phishing and trying to bypass your, multi-million-dollar security mechanisms and email filtering platforms and EDRs. And what do you feel about physical security as it relates to, digital security or compares?
Yeah, I think they're directly linked. I think your ability to maintain physical security of your location, of sites where you have critical infrastructure, like it's directly linked to data security. I think it's the foundation of data security because you have to have the ability to safeguard tangible assets, that house the digital information, to your point. So we take it very seriously. Everything from access controls, making sure that critical infrastructure is secure, whether it's on-prem or in a co-location. So your servers, your endpoints, any type of data storage devices, and it's not just about like exfiltration. It also could just be like preventing physical damage to those devices. Partner with the right organizations. So like data center risk, like making sure you have the right partner there. As it relates to just maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of the information and systems you have in those sites. But like even looking at insider threat risk. So like how do you restrict the people within your organization from doing harm from a physical security perspective? So who can access what, where, what specific roles are given that access? Those are all things that we think about. And then it ties back to even elements of physical security tie back to just disaster recovery protocols, business continuity planning. You're just making sure that your physical infrastructure is in a place where you can continue on with the mission in the event that there's a disruption, whether that be cyber related or not. And so I think they're directly linked. I don't think you can say that you have a cybersecurity program if you don't also have physical security controls and security measures in place. And that also ties back to what we talked about earlier, which is that's part of security awareness training and the cross training of staff. Training people to understand that physical and cybersecurity are directly linked, and you have to be aware of who's coming into your space for what purpose. I think there were a lot of challenges around that, certainly during COVID, when you had people, being able to show up with a mask on and limited ability to maybe identify some of these folks. But I think organizations have really advanced their capabilities in that area. And so you have to take it very seriously. You have to be able to secure the environment and secure who's in it. Things as simple as like, visitor management systems, who's coming in, who's signing in, how are you monitoring what they're doing? It's also directly tied to if you're doing a thorough risk assessment, your annual risk assessment should be focused on both the physical security aspects as well as any digital vulnerabilities that your organization has.
Which I'm assuming you're also inferring some physical testing, like possibly penetration testing, things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Social engineering, all of that. Like you got to do the battle drills to determine where you are vulnerable and how you can, remediate those risks.
Beautiful. I think one thing that you also discussed offline here was talking about some of like the most sophisticated systems and well-vetted software solutions, SaaS, even third-party providers. Like every software can have vulnerabilities. And so how can an organization sort of stay ahead and manage those, risks essentially that could be presented? I think we inherently trust, these large organizations, Microsoft, Salesforce, whatever, you name it. And we just expect that they're sort of bulletproof. But I think that gets proved time and time again. That's just not true. But how can organizations protect against those types of things?
Yeah, I think, the unfortunate reality is, bad actors oftentimes are a step ahead, or maybe two, depending on what they're doing. So I feel like your ability to manage vulnerabilities, it feels like a never ending game of like whack-a-mole. You take care of an issue over here and something else presents itself. That's also why you're never done. So you can never check the box. There's always a new way of doing things. There's always a new way of exploiting vulnerabilities. And to your point, it could be the most well-respected and reputable technology company, software company in the world, all the way down to legacy systems and legacy applications that vulnerabilities can present themselves. I think it ties back to just taking a proactive approach to identifying where these vulnerabilities can present themselves. So, like as an example, we do regular vulnerability scans, right? Where we're always trying to identify and address vulnerabilities very promptly. And again, there's some automation around that, but there's also manual efforts that go into not only the identification but also the remediation of those vulnerabilities, and also just like the prioritization of what those vulnerabilities are, because not every vulnerability is the same. I think about like patch management and how we've matured and progressed in our organization as it relates to our ability to make sure that we're applying the right updates and patches to software and systems as soon as they become available. I look at things like threat intelligence. So like what systems are you using to stay informed and stay on top of emerging threats and vulnerabilities? And again, sometimes you don't have the benefit of having access to that information. I mean, there are zero-day exploits for a reason, right? But I think if you are thinking about taking a proactive approach and proactively monitoring them and automating some of these capabilities, I think you put the organization in a better place. There's also things that we're always thinking about doing as it relates to, if you're operating under the assumption that a bad actor is already in your environment, like going back to our previous conversation, how do you make it hard for them to do whatever they're going to do, or how do you limit the capabilities that they would have in the event that they were to get in, whether you're thinking about ways to segment your network, limit access, just really minimize the damage, or give your organization and team time, again, once they do detect that activity, to respond ultimately. So there's a lot of things you do to put restrictions in place to make it very difficult. But I definitely think when it comes to vulnerability management, you got to be proactive. You can't be reactive. And I think organizations should be leveraging all the new technologies and capabilities that are out there to help it make it a little easier for you to do that. And if you can't do it in-house, get a good partner that can help you do it.
Sure. That is unintentionally good segue to what I was just going to say. I think something that I've noticed and really decided to found Three Nails out of was this. It's more of it's just a disagreement with the way that a lot of cyber firms sort of conduct offensive security services, despite what the intent or need of the organization is. I think Three Nails was founded to really produce highest quality results. And so when you say vulnerability scanning and things like that, I feel like a lot of organizations I've worked with, they think that only means network vulnerability scanning. And, one of our services is called CVAM. It's continuous vulnerability assessment and management. We actually scan Active Directory as well. We'll scan your external network. Like, these are areas also that are very important to be addressing. So I think it's interesting that, from my experience being in the industry for 7 years, pen testing professionally, I also have an interesting perspective to bring. We're able to sort of bring more value and bring more cutting edge technology to the industry to really ensure like a well-rounded view and security posture is actually being had by the organization. So just an interesting note there. When you were saying vuln scanning, I was like, it's so important, but that's not going to help you discover software vulnerabilities that are not already found. Like that. Right. That's going to identify already found vulnerabilities. So being ahead of the game, is so important. And one thing you said too is like bad actors are always a step ahead. I wanted to stop and say good actors are too. Like, we're out here, we're doing research as well. So we have the ability to come alongside and help and do discovery. And, we search for vulnerabilities in software all the time. We've got a handful of CVEs at Three Nails as well. Like, there is an effort being made by good actors too. So just to advocate and just to, add more just reinforcement onto what you're saying. I think
you're spot on. I mean,
yeah.
There are a lot of Jedis out there, like a lot of workers, that are on the right side of things. I think it's important, like I said, going back to the conversation around, you don't have to go at this alone. You have to build, an ecosystem of strategic partners and capabilities to make sure that you're in a position where you are out ahead, it's a very dynamic environment. You're never done. Like I said, there's never a box to be checked. It's always what's next. How do we think about this differently? Because that is how the bad actors are going about it, and they're doing this at scale. I mean, they're leveraging technology. I mean, you could have a threat actor that has very little technical acumen and capability, but now because of the advancements in technology and some of the capabilities that are available, even if you think about like generative AI, like that capability allows someone with, again, minimal technology capabilities and background to do something very sophisticated at scale. And they only got to get in once.
Yep.
We got to block them every time. So
yeah,
I'm glad to hear that there are Jedis out there like you, Vincent, and the team, because again, we need more people that are fighting the good fight.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's almost like inevitable. Like, I don't know if it was you, Jason. I feel like it might have been you, like admitting like nobody can like basically hold up against a nation state actor. You know, like they've got infinite time, infinite resources, practically. Like, it's not a matter of if; it's more a matter of when potentially, you know, they want to compromise you. And, you know, at that point, like it's sort of a game over situation. But like you're talking about putting all these security controls in place, doing the right thing is like, you know, it's just, you got to believe in your organization to even care enough to address it. I feel like some organizations are more like, you know, maybe we'll fall back on insurance and maybe we'll comply and hit the check boxes. But I think individuals like yourself who genuinely care about their organization, it really shows through the security posture and through the effort they make to you know, to bring a culture of security into the organization versus just checking boxes and just, you know, following the next hot take on LinkedIn. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, even that though. Okay. So even if, let's just say you took that approach, right? Where you're like, you know, if bad things happen, we're insured. Absolutely. Like you have to have coverage, you know, but you also have to be able to keep and maintain that coverage.
Yep.
Right. And so in the event that you have an incident or you have a data breach, you have to be able to explain how that happened. Like there's going to be a forensic investigation.
Yep.
Right. And I can tell you, having gone through multiple cyber insurance renewal processes, it's getting harder and harder to not only get access to coverage, but to maintain that coverage depending on the type of business you're in and the type of exposure that you might have. And the premiums are going up because these insurance companies, you know, have had to deal with a lot of events because of the state of the cybercrime industry. And so your ability to actually get coverage, much less maintain it at a reasonable rate without just having your premiums go completely, you know, just skyrocketing, you're going to have the ability to show and demonstrate that you are advancing the capabilities of your program. You are hardening your environment. You are maturing your approach. So you can't just do nothing and then just rely on the insurers to cover, you know, the losses. That game isn't going to work. Not to mention, you're going to have to be able to communicate to your clients. And what's that message going to be, right? It's one thing to have my car on the parking lot right now, have all the windows down, and have my keys in the ignition. Yeah. And it's another thing to say, my car was locked, my keys were not in it. You see what I'm saying? Like, I did everything I could to secure that environment. Bad things happened either way. That's one thing to say that I did everything I could versus I did nothing and bad things happened. So I do think organizations have to be prepared to explain, you know, the program and the systems and the processes they have in place, regardless if they have an event or not. But I don't think just relying on insurance is a way to get through this.
And how should a CISO, CTO gain sort of the buy-in of executive leadership to make sure that these types of things can be implemented? I feel like that's such a challenge, you know, for some organizations, penny pinching or even struggling financially. Like, it's worth the investment, obviously, but, you know, in your experience and recommendation, what word of advice would you give to others in similar positions as yourself that might be having trouble there?
Yeah, great question. So a couple of things come to mind. First, cybersecurity is a business problem. It's not a technology or an IT problem. So organizational leadership needs to understand that. And organizational leadership needs to align around the fact that the cybercrime industry continues to grow for a reason, because it's successful. They're attacking businesses, whether it's a state-sponsored entity or an individual that's doing harm on their own. Like, this is real. The threats are real. So it's a business problem, not just an IT or technology problem. I think it's important that you really align business goals with cybersecurity programs and be able to demonstrate how those security initiatives support organizational objectives and strategic plans and how you're protecting key assets of the organization. We're big believers that our security program should add to our business resiliency. We're big believers that security should provide our clients with peace of mind. We're big believers that security should help us protect all the productivity gains of our digital transformation and innovation initiatives. And again, going back to the conversation we just had, like we also want to make sure that we can not only maintain coverage, but also manage our insurance premium increases as it relates to what's happening within the industry. So we want to be modeling the right behavior. We want to be sending the right signals. We want to be showing all the stakeholders that we engage with as an organization doing business that we care and we take it very seriously. So I think you have to start with making sure that leadership understands that it's a business problem, not just an IT problem, and then again, align around those business goals. And you can do it a variety of ways. So you have to be able to quantify risk. So that goes back to where we started. We talked about risk assessments, the ongoing vulnerability scans, the pen tests. Like you have to get data, right? So this isn't specific to security or cybersecurity programs, but just in general, if you're trying to get leadership of an organization to support an idea, you got to have data, because without data, everyone has an opinion, right? And if you're making a subjective argument, that can be very challenging. So, make sure you're doing data-driven assessments, make sure you're identifying risks, and you're also identifying potential impacts as a result of those risks that you've identified. I think that helps really, develop a compelling use case for investments around cybersecurity data privacy. I also think you have to be able to emphasize what is the return on said investments. So that could be cost savings, that could be protecting the reputation of the organization, obviously avoiding risks. Like there's a variety of things you could do to say, there's a pretty significant return on us being able to do this well. Unfortunately, there are so many examples out there in the headlines right now that make it very easy to tell this story and to share this narrative. If you look at just using real world examples of when things go wrong and when organizations don't make those investments and they don't take a proactive position as it relates to security. So you can just point to the headlines and say, well, there's another example. And we certainly are seeing that within the legal industry. I mean, left and right. And then again, you might not be able to do it all at once. So you have to develop a roadmap. You have to prioritize your approach. We're not trying to boil the ocean here, right? So I think building a strategy that allows you to have incremental wins and really propose a phased implementation where you can show progress, I think that helps build confidence and really sets the stage for your ability to implement longer term strategies. So if you go in and say, I need all this stuff yesterday, like that's not going to happen. But if you can take deep breaths and baby steps, you're actually moving toward the objective, and you're doing it in a way that you're bringing people along with it. And so those are just some ideas that come to mind. You also, depending on the environment you're in, you might not have a choice. Meaning, if you're in a highly regulated industry, like there might be compliance requirements that you have to comply with. So the argument might not even really be an argument. It might be like, we have no choice. We have to do this, right? That's cost of doing business. But in the event that you're not in an industry that has those regulatory requirements, again, I think some of the other examples that I've shared are ways to really get senior leadership on board with the idea that, hey, this is a business problem, not a technology or IT problem. And we got to be doing the right things because we're living through a very scary time. And the cyber crime industry continues to grow and become more complex, and bad things are happening to good people.
Jason, would you agree that tracking and managing vulnerabilities over time is important? Like if you're continuously getting tested and results are persisting through different tests, that could be months in between. Do you feel like it's important to be able to recognize that that's sort of happening? Or, and the reason I'm asking is because that's exactly the same take. What you just said just affirmed me that we're making the right choices around what we're developing, because if you're not able to track, the only way you're going to know if you're getting better is by trying to guess if, it's because we haven't gotten compromised yet, or that way, at least that we know about. So it's like, it's not a assurance like, we just haven't gotten compromised, and that's how we know we're getting better. No, that's not true. You need to be able to track and digest information, that data. Pen tests are great, but being able to continuously see, we did a pen test And now we've mitigated these, and now we can see that we've mitigated them, and we've got a score and all these things to actually track that information, progress moving forward. I mean, that's just sort of like, yeah, like I said, it's just affirming that tracking and whatnot is super, super important. But
no, I think you're spot on. I think, again, that's why I made the point that I did. Without data, everyone has an opinion. So
exactly,
you have to be able to, and again, we're talking about cybersecurity, but this is true of any type of initiative that's promoting change. Okay. So true change management, right? And I do think that you have to have the right metrics in place to measure successful outcomes. And so you have to have the ability to combine the quantitative, but also the qualitative outcomes. And so those assessments that we're talking about, I think, are mission critical. I think you get access to data to really provide organizational leadership with more of a comprehensive view of the maturity and effectiveness of your program through those types of assessments. And then you can show the progression over time. Like, here's the baseline, here's where we started, here are the things, here are the controls we put in place. We did another assessment, here are the outcomes. And you can start to see, like, hey, we're really making progress toward, the objectives that we set out to accomplish. And so I definitely think you need the data. You have to have the metrics. I think the metrics vary based on, again, the industry that you're in, regulatory requirements, what are the specific goals of the program. But risk assessments, absolutely. And you have to think about the frequency of those, how thorough they are, all those things. And then we look at other metrics too, like, so you think about incident response, like, okay, what is your mean time to detect something? And then what is your mean time to respond in the event you had an incident? How many incidents are you resolving? Because to your point, if you're relying on, hey, we were breached, like, that's not the metric you want to be improving on. Right? No one wants that. No one wants that. Right. So proactively, though, if you're doing those scans, you're running those tests, you're doing those assessments, I think you can get to a place where you can start to look at your ability to, again, detect, respond, and ultimately recover. We look at other metrics like security awareness training. So the percentage of employees that are going through it. We run simulated phishing attacks. So what are the fail rates? What are the click rates, right? Yep. You can start to assess the culture and the behavior just based on how people are engaging with security training material, the questions they're asking to our service desk, the things that they're having people check before, question before you click, all those things. So I think security awareness and training, there's metrics around that. There's metrics around vulnerability management, which you talked about. There's metrics around, again, depending if you're in a regulatory environment, not like compliance and audit findings, like that's another metric we look at. Resource allocation. So you have to have a lot of controls in place, but what resources are being utilized to put those controls in place? And again, depending if you're taking more of a manual versus automated approach, you might be using resources more in one area that you may not want to be investing. And again, everything we're talking about, this whole conversation, it also extends to your supply chain. So you can have the most secure environment in the world, right? But if you open yourself up to risk through third-party vendors and your supply chain, that's as problematic, sometimes more problematic. So how you assess, how you onboard vendors, how you manage those vendors and that partner ecosystem ongoing is critically important to your organization's ability to manage risk.
Beautiful insight, Jason. I really, really appreciate that. I think we're probably here at time. So yeah, we'll wrap up just by once again thanking you for coming onto the podcast and being willing to share your expertise and knowledge. If anybody wants to contact you, Jason, we'll obviously have you tagged in the description of this podcast. Is it okay if people
LinkedIn,
want to reach out?
Let people reach out on LinkedIn. Again, I think, this is a collaborative effort. We're all in this together. We're all experts in the making. So we're all trying to learn and get better together. So yeah, I'd love to continue the conversation. If anyone wants to chat, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for joining our podcast today. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.